So the first thing that we're going to do is take the two pieces and create our seam on this countertop. So we have a layout guide and a straight edge here for the seaming bit. That layout guide is going to be the difference for the router base. So there's an A side and a B side. We're going to run that A side, and on the router bit you have to match up the A side with the A side. So we'll go ahead and run that piece. And then after we run that, it will show you that it's a wavy bit. So those waves on either side are going to lock in with one another to create a really nice seam. So after we do the A side, we have to do the same thing to the B side, make sure that layout guide is flush on the B side, and then run the B side of the router on the B side of the countertop. So as they come together, you can see it locks in place really nice. So we need to prepare the solid surface for glue up. So we will put the solid surface down and we're gonna glue these blocks on. Normally we would use a 1 inch by 1 inch block, but this time I'm using a 1 inch by 2 inch block, hoping that that might give a little bit more strength. But we're just gonna put some hot melt on, and we'll put 6 blocks down in total. This will allow us to clamp that seam together and allow the glue to set. So I'll bring it over to my flat table, which is just an MDF table. It needs to be a perfectly flat table. And we need to clean the solid surface. So solid surface always needs to be cleaned before being glued, and we are always going to clean that with denatured alcohol. And then lay down some wax paper just so that the glue doesn't stick to the table. Here I'm just getting my clamps preset so that I can get everything glued up fast once I put the glue down. And we'll need some clamps to hold down to the table because those clamps in the middle are going to want to pull up the ends. So here I'm putting that glue down on the solid surface. You really have to only do one edge, and then we'll bring it together. I'll clamp down lightly against the table, and then I will bring those clamps in. Now if you clamp too tight, those blocks are going to pop off, so just light pressure is all you need. What I'm doing here is I'm putting some weights on the sides so that it doesn't want to peel up and that we can have a perfectly flat countertop. Once that glue is all set and dry, we're going to go ahead and put this in a vise. We're going to knock those blocks right off of the countertop. To clean up the hot glue, we're just going to spray some denatured alcohol and use a very sharp chisel with very light pressure so we don't nick or damage the top. To clean up the solid surface glue after it's hardened and cured, we're going to need to use a router with a straight bit. And then on the bottom of the router base, we'll put solid surface to create little skis for the router so that it's elevated above the glue. You want your router base to be set about 5 thousandths above the surface of the countertop. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we will run the router along the top. Now ideally, it's not going to take any material off the top of your countertop and just remove the glue, although here my router base went a little into the countertop. So I got to clean that up. But the nice thing about solid surface is it is sandable. So I'm just going to sand it down right here. And as I sand it down, you'll see that the groove that I made, which was just about 1/1000th of an inch, goes right away. Once you have everything flat and sanded down and that seam is all done, we need to cut down the countertop. And we're going to get it down to our final size. So the final size is going to be 17 in length by 12 in width. So I'm going to just cut it down into the width right now. After that, I'm going to just measure from the seam because we need to be 6 inches from the seam per our plans. So I'll just make a straight line with a square, and then we are going to cross cut that down so that we have 6 inches from the seam on one side. After we get that cut down 6 inches from our seam, we are going to need to cut it to our final length, which is 17 inches. And so I'm just setting up a bump block here, and I'll set my fence to 18 inches, knowing that my bump block is 1 inch. This way I can just take that from the seam, cut it down, and I will have 11 inches on one side and 6 inches from the other side of the seam, making our final length 17. Make sure to save that cutoff. We're going to be using that cutoff to get our seam support as well as our drop edge out of it. Once we get that seam support cut down to 2 inches, we're going to go ahead and cut down our drop edge at 1 inch. So reset the fence to 1 inch, set up for a narrow rip, and then go ahead and rip that extra bit down to 1 inch. As you can see, the seam support and the drop edge. So we're going to put the seam support in place now. So from the middle of the seam, I just went over 1 inch on both sides, making 2 inches. I'm going to make those marks on the ends, so when I clean off that surface with the denatured alcohol, I'll be able to still see where that seam needs to go. So we'll clean off the surface with the denatured alcohol, which is where we're going to glue it down. And then, as you can see, that edge is going to allow me to know where I need to place that seam support. So we'll get the glue on that seam support, and then we will just press it in place and line it up. And I'm just putting a heavy weight on top. Then we have to go along the edge with the glue as well, so right into that corner, and I'm just going to squeeze that glue right into that edge. We'll let that set up, make sure that it's where it needs to be, and just let it sit. So after it's all dry, what we are going to do is we'll take a pattern bit to trim off any overhang or excess squeeze out from those edges. So I'll do one side, flip it over, and I will do the same thing to the other side. Those pattern bits get really close, but not always perfect. So what we can do is put it back down and just sand off the rest. Put it over, sand the other side as well. Get it nice and flush. With the seam support done, we are going to go ahead and glue on the no drip edge. So we got some jigs there for the no drip edge that will allow it to come up a 1/4 inch. So we are going to hot melt those jigs right onto the surface on both sides. You'll need 2 of them. And as you can see, the no drip edge can come up and line up flush with those blocks. Once you get those blocks on, I'm just going to put some spring clamps so that the countertop isn't as tippy. And I'll bring that edge all the way up to those blocks. Now using these 3-way clamps, I'm going to clamp to the top of the countertop and then clamp against it on the no drip edge to the countertop. So put those all the way along the edge, and then as you can see, you're going to want that top clamp to be against and parallel with the top piece of the countertop. So back up all of those clamps on the top edge, but leave it clamped to the top of the countertop. And we'll slide out the no drip edge, and then we're going to have to get that all cleaned up. So with denatured alcohol, wipe down everything again before we glue anything. So I'll spray both surfaces down so that we have proper adhesion. Once we get the countertop all cleaned up, we're going to spread that glue all the way along that countertop top edge. And then we're going to slide in the no drip edge. Try not to smear anything. It can be a little tricky here to get that through. And then try to flush that up as best as possible and keep it against those top blocks so that we're a 1/4 inch overhanging. So go ahead and go through and tighten up those clamps. I like to just lightly tighten them up and then go back and tighten them up even further. This just allows it so that it doesn't slip around as much as you're trying to tighten those down. Once that no drip edge is glued and cured, we're going to be able to glue up the drop edge. So again, we're going to use some 1-inch blocks and some hot melt on those to line up for glue up on this drop edge. We want that drop edge to be flush with the countertop. So we're just going to make sure that it stays flush as we glued these blocks down. I like to start with one side, do the other end, and then glue up the middle one. This just allows it so that it doesn't like to move around or change its placement. So we'll spray it with some denatured alcohol, clean up the surface of that countertop as well as the drop edge. We will clean up as well so that we have proper glue adhesion. Once you have everything clean, we'll go ahead and glue it down. So we'll squeeze that glue onto that drop edge. And you don't see it here, but don't forget to get the end. Anywhere the solid surface is touching, it needs to be glued. So here we'll put the spring clamps down. Again, start from one side and then the other, and then I like to work my way down in the middle. This just secures it where it needs to be without sliding around everywhere. Now I'm just going in with a solid surface stick, and I'm spraying that stick with denatured alcohol and then just cleaning out the inside of the squeeze out of the glue. This is just going to make your cleanup process a lot easier once everything is cured. As you can see, most of that glue is all cleaned up and clamped down tight, and in about an hour everything should be cured. Once everything is cured, we're able to then route out the no drip edge. And now that that drop edge is on, we have 1 inch on one side, but not on the other. So you'll just need a spacer on one side to clamp this all down. The bit is on a bearing that will just ride along the top. You can see I'm going from right to left. Just keep that in mind. Since we're rotating the base of the router, we're not able to go left to right. So the direction changes, otherwise you're going to climb cut and it might want to jump on you. This is quite a messy process, so I would recommend wearing a mask and just get ready to get a little dusty. So I'm running it again. I made a few adjustments there. I just wanted to get a little bit more of that glue cleaned up, and then I am going to go through and sand everything down so that it is really nice.